Hey guys, welcome back to another Thursday night video. So quick things. Number one, I'm going to list this below, but there's a link that Amber sent out about a week ago in the SLU Chi Alpha GroupMe Hub that just is designed to get feedback from you guys, because it's really hard for us as staff to know exactly everything that's going on campus, since we are not allowed to be on campus and have our normal meetings and do our normal things. And so if you don't mind taking a couple minutes, we'd love to hear back from you, just the things that God has been doing in your life, but also just what's been connecting with you as we start planning for this extended break and then into the spring semester. So we'd love to hear back from you on that. Secondly, this is our last series, last week in the series of justice and the character of God, and it's actually a testimony night. So tonight we're going to hear the testimony of Mercer Martin, but also have a conversation in the midst of that of how he came so interested in the law that led him to WashU Law School. Sorry, Mercer. WashU Law School, where he is about to get done with his law degree. The next 2 Thursdays, the last 2 Thursdays of this semester, I'm going to do some videos to just kind of wrap up this fall semester and talk about some things that I want to address as we move forward. But love to hear your feedback. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Mercer, and we are praying for you and thinking about you. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me or Amber in the process. So God bless, and we'll see you soon. All right, bye.
Show me life. My name's Rachel. I'm a PT major, a freshman, and in the future, I would like to work with the disabled either in a hospital or in a school.
Ah, very cool. I support that. Awesome. So Rachel, this weather outside, am I right? It was so cold and rainy today, it doesn't even feel like October. So my question to you is, what is your favorite season?
My favorite season, I'm kind of torn. I really like Christmas, but I think it'd have to be autumn.
Autumn. Okay. What do you like to do in the city in the fall?
Well, my family normally goes to Eckerd's because my mom makes really good applesauce. But also, I'm known for going to Fright Fest 4 times every October.
Oh my goodness. Do you have any good stories? I've never been. I think that's a yes.
Oh, she does have a story. Please share. Please share.
Well, when we were awkward sophomores, we were trying to pair these 2 friends up, and it didn't work out. So she went to the bathroom to go rant about him, and then it turns out one of the monster people was in there, and she was also scared of them. So I just kind of had to support her in a stall, waiting for the monster to walk away.
Why was the monster in the bathroom?
I don't know. I feel like that's not fair.
No.
People need to have somewhere where they can hide if they're scared.
Or cry.
That too. Lots of drama goes down.
Yeah. I've cried at the right festival. Moving on. Okay. So we have a really important question to ask involving our friend Max here. So Max is a fan favorite, right? So I have a feeling that you plan on kidnapping Max at some point
You're
during
awesome.
this year.
Yeah.
So, when you plan on kidnapping Max, who would be your accomplices and why?
Besides us two.
Yeah,
Because
I
we know
mean-
an inside job would be your best
We just
option.
walk out right now.
Well, I feel like stealing it with you guys wouldn't really be stealing him because
Fair.
you're still there. It has to be kind of secretive. So,
Okay.
I would have to go with Lizzie Marr. I think we have a shared love of Max.
Yes.
Also, Rachel Pasapera. We're both in Micah together, and I think that would solidify our bond. Is planning a heist together.
Oh, for sure.
I could see Max living in Mark.
Yeah. He'd make
There's
a
some
great.
dogs down there.
What's the word for a Micah outfit? Is there a word for what was the group chat name?
Mike Alpha?
Mike Alphin.
The-
Max and Mike Alphin.
Beautiful.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing with us, Rachel.
That's all the time we have for today.
See you next time on Be the Alphin.
Everybody, welcome back to this Thursday's edition of Justice Conversations, if we want to call it that. This is our last one. It's also the first Thursday of the month, and that is always testimony night. So this one's a little bit different. We're going to hear the testimony of Mercer, who's usually on the opposite side of these conversations. But his story links with the concept or the conversation of justice since he is in law school. And so we're going to listen to his story and then maybe have some questions about how he views the law, what the law does in issues of justice, and go from there. So you're always giving the conversation and asking the questions and getting the storylines. So now we're doing it for you. So what is your story? Where were you born, raised? How did you come to know Jesus? Those kinds of things.
Okay. So it's true. I am on the other side of the conversation this time.
Although the same side of the table.
That's
we
true.
didn't switch sides.
That's true. I didn't even. That's
this
not
is
on
my better.
purpose.
This is my better side.
Okay. I see what you're doing. Okay. So I was born in Tucson, Arizona, but have grown up pretty much my whole life in Springfield, Missouri. The reason I grew up in Springfield is because both of my parents are ministers. They both work with Chi Alpha, and they moved to Springfield to do their ministry work at the national headquarters for the Assemblies of God Church. So growing up in Springfield, I would say that I've always known the Lord, there was never like a conversion moment or, a particular time that I recall, making the prayer to accept the Lord into my heart. I always knew him, thanks so much to my family,
Sure.
to my church, and just the way I was raised. I do feel like I was always saved in the sense that I always knew God. So I think my story is more of one of fluctuations in my relationship with God. God continually revealing new things to me, me drawing closer, farther away at different points. So that's kind of been how my trajectory has gone. So that being said, as a young child, definitely had an understanding of who God was, understood that he was moving in my life. But I think the experience that probably was most solidifying for faith in childhood, and maybe even still to this day, was my experiences abroad.
Okay.
Because my family, my parents brought us to the countries of Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan for 2 years when I was in middle school. So I was there in 5th grade and 8th grade. And my parents actually started Chi Alpha campus ministries in each of those countries. Mm-hmm. And those countries are former Soviet countries and predominantly Muslim.
Yeah.
So really interesting cultural mix and history. And the students that my parents were reaching out to were all primarily Muslim, or maybe Russian Orthodox or atheist, but primarily Muslim. And it was just eye-opening to see God move in people's hearts in a place where becoming a Christian has enormous costs. These students I saw gave up everything, their whole family, job prospects, their communities. Many, I know of none that were killed. I know of many that were physically attacked brutally, purely because of their accepting of Jesus Christ. That put, faith in a totally new perspective for me. And I saw God work miraculously in those people's lives, through the ministry of, the Americans that I was with, through, the people from there, the Kazakh and Kyrgyz people, God moving in their lives. Just saw so many supernatural things and miracles. And so whenever I question, whenever I have questions of faith, or struggles, that's always a time I can look back to see, like, look at what God did, at that time in my life, and the things I got to see there. So that was very formative. But again, I was pretty young at that time. I was like 11 and 14, the 2 different years.
Okay.
So then I went to high school, and high school, those years, I would say my faith was a bit pharisaical, in the sense that I knew so much about the Bible, about what was right and wrong. I was confident in that, confident in trying to always do the right things, and yet highly judgmental towards anyone that was doing things differently than me, and reflected very negatively in my character, which is sin in itself, to be judgmental and to look down on others, and to not be compassionate and caring. And I think that was something I struggled with most in high school. Was I understood the moral teachings of Christianity, but God's call to be witnesses and to be compassionate and loving, and those things I think were largely missing. But fortunately, when I went into undergrad at Missouri State University, I quickly quickly got involved at Chi Alpha at Missouri State. And that was where my faith blossomed hugely, in the sense that it was the first time I was with a strong community of peers who were, in my same situation, but completely sold out for God. And it was completely reflected in their character. It was reflected in everything they did, reflected in, how they treated each other and those around them. All the things I'm saying, of course, can be attributed to SLU's Chi Alpha as well, but those are the things that stuck out to me first at Missouri State. And so through my time in Chi Alpha there, that is where I feel like the Lord really began to change my heart, to be more compassionate and loving, and to be an actual witness, and not just some person who views himself as a judge of everyone else. But that's not our task at all, and instead it's to be outreaching and sharing God's love. So that was, I think, the largest change that happened in undergrad. And then to go off just my Christian testimony, to share a little bit how I ended up here in St. Louis at WashU in law school. I probably knew I wanted to be in law school since I was in high school. In high school, it just made sense. I wanted to do something that could have an impact and be meaningful, and that also fit with my skill sets and interests. I always felt I was a pretty good communicator, writer, logical thinker, so it all made sense. That decision was solidified in undergrad, largely through my experience in Chi Alpha. Of course, you would know this arguably more than anyone, but there are, of course, numerous Chi Alpha groups across the country that faced major issues in regards to religious liberty, of campuses, universities saying, Chi Alpha, you can no longer be on this campus and be a part of this community because of your religious beliefs, and because you require your leaders to adhere to these religious beliefs. That was happening a lot when I was in my 4 years in undergrad. Fortunately, it didn't happen at Missouri State. Missouri State's been super supportive of Chi Alpha. But as a result of that, there was major litigation that was happening, and a law firm, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, stepped in and has defended Chi Alpha ever since the first issue came up, completely pro bono. So I got to meet those attorneys, see the work they were doing. That opened up my eyes, one, to see what excellent advocates and lawyers look like, people that care so much about Chi Alpha and our mission, that care so much about the issue of religious liberty, and do everything with excellence and integrity. Great examples. Because our image of lawyers is often so negative, and I can only say positive things about the lawyers at that firm. So
and
that
they're
was
not all Christian either.
No, the Beckett Fund.
They're not necessarily all religious even.
Correct. The Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, just to share a little bit about them, they are a secular law firm that it dedicates exclusively to litigating on religious liberty issues. They, and again, their attorneys are from varying faith backgrounds or no faith backgrounds. They have no faith mission. It is purely to defend the principle of religious liberty, believing that that's important to everyone, regardless of faith or no faith. And so they have won 7 cases at the Supreme Court. They've lost none, and they have a case being argued at the Supreme Court on Wednesday. So, and that case will be very, very important for religious, arguably the most important we've had in decades. So that's a little bit about them, but just to get back briefly to how they led me here. So they were, showed me the importance of religious liberty, what good lawyers look like, and just gave me a passion for the law in general, that how you can use the law for good. And so I am now at WashU. I'm in my 3rd year of law school. I am, it looks like right now, going to work when I graduate in Phoenix at a law firm doing commercial litigation. But I worked at the Beckett Fund for my first summer in law school. I care a lot about religious liberty, care a lot about a lot of different topics of the law, but that's one I'm particularly passionate about. But yeah, right now, enjoying law school. Of course, I got plugged in at SLU's Chi Alpha, and that's been tremendous for my growth as well, for many of the same reasons I spoke about earlier. But yeah, that's kind of my story and how I ended up here.
And Missouri State and St. Louis University are very different for a number of different reasons, as is WashU. So you've gotten a lot of, not just the universities that you saw overseas, and it should also be mentioned that you went to Russia for 1 or 2 semesters in undergrad.
I was in Russia for a summer and a semester, so
summer
7 months.
So you have a lot of different experiences in terms of what college campus life looks like. College students from around the world, all that kind of stuff. And it seems as though whenever we talk about religious liberty, like it was kind of your passion, is that there's 2 sides of the spectrum. There's one where a society is dominated by religion, and justice is not met because religion is too strong. Like there's a kind of a heavy-handedness to it. And then there's one where it's almost completely extinct. And so there seems to be kind of this middle ground of religious liberty and justice that you kind of have to carve.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know whenever you feel like religious liberty has gone too far versus it hasn't been given a platform at all? Does that make sense? Is there a middle ground that you guys talk about when you get into religious liberty issues?
That's a really interesting question. I guess I'll start with why I think religious liberty is a justice issue.
Yeah.
Because I view justice as individuals receiving what they would deserve in the eyes of God.
Okay.
What does He think we as people, how should we be treating each other in our societies? And when you look at it like that, there are so many different laws that we can completely reasonably agree on. That maybe should taxes be higher? Well, does God really want us to tax other people this much or that much? There's never an exact answer to that. But there's some things that we know for a fact God does not condone. And we know that as a society, we should try to prevent those things from happening. Some of those things are very clear. And I think one of those is the concept of religious freedom, of letting people pursue truth and pursue God in a free manner. Because we know from biblical teaching that God has given us free will to seek out for Him and to seek Him out and to make that decision ourselves. As a matter of fact, it's easily argued that we're not saved if we don't make that decision ourselves, to fully embrace Him, to fully reject Him, to embrace any path. But it's very clear in Scripture that is something God has created us to decide. That's part of love, is making that decision. So that's why religious liberty, having the freedom to make those decisions ourselves, is, I think, a critical justice issue that we as Christians must support in a just society. Now, that being said, you brought up the question, well, how does that land in these two camps, which I think you outlined accurately, that some people, Christians or others, want a form of theocracy where we impose religion per se on others, and of course those that think religion should have no place in the sphere. And that gets to other issues of like establishing religion, which is different than religious freedom. But when it comes to just religious freedom itself, allowing people to make decisions about their religion and live their lives in accordance with their religious beliefs, since we know that is God's intended plan for people, that is to let people make those decisions. As a society, to encourage that, we should pass laws, regulations, societal norms that allow that to the fullest extent possible. So I think maybe the better dynamic would actually be two spectrums of one saying, we pass laws that require certain religion, and others that say, we maybe pass laws that, demand secularity. That's not a word, but demand everything to be secular. What I think the best middle ground is we need to allow people to express their religion to as far as possible until we're getting to the point where we're causing far, far more harm by allowing it. So, for example, a law that, or a religious group that said, human sacrifice is a part of my religion. That's critical to our faith and super important. Well, we as a society value human life too much to let people kill others on account of their religion. There have to be limits. But in my opinion, those limits should be very, very limited. And so in the legal world, we have a phrase called strict scrutiny. So when it comes to laws, a rule applied is that any law that would infringe on freedom of religion cannot apply to people of faith if it inhibits their faith, that won't apply to them unless it is the only way to achieve a compelling interest. So, for example, if our interest is to protect people from being killed and murdered,
Right.
which is a very legitimate interest,
Right.
And we're trying to apply that to that group of that people of faith that want to kill people on account of their faith,
Right.
we would say, well, this law is going to apply to you because this is the only way to stop people from being killed, is for us to apply this law to you.
Right.
But it's very rare that that's the only means
Yeah.
for you to achieve that interest. So,
Yeah.
for example, a landmark Supreme Court case that dealt with this were Amish folk that didn't want to send their kids to public schools. They wanted to train their kids in high school in their own faith tradition.
Okay.
And there was a state law that said you cannot, everyone must be in mandatory public schooling.
Okay.
Well, the interest of that is to create educated citizens that are going to be a part of productive in society.
Sure.
Well, the justices looked at this and said, well, Amish people are productive people in society. They're well educated, they're just educated differently.
Yeah.
So under this analysis, we're giving you your freedom of religion. We're not going to apply this law to you. It can't constitutionally, because there's other ways for the government to do this. The one being letting you teach them yourselves.
Right.
So that's the framework I look to, is let people pursue religion to the fullest extent until there's just no other option unless preventing you from doing that.
Yeah. Significant breakdowns of society
Yeah.
would be the outside of it.
Right.
So you'd get this from like what happened in Waco, maybe.
Oh yeah.
The stuff like that,
Mhm.
where you had to have intervention because what was going on in that context was necessarily destructive,
Mhm.
like to the people around them. But it sounds like the way you're viewing it is scripturally, religious liberty needs to be made so that people can have the freedom to accept or reject God, which means that part of that justice system needs to be enough freedom for people to reject God. Meaning that it's not just all laws that benefit Christians,
Oh yeah.
because
absolutely.
that law may end up being the very thing that gives the person the freedom to reject God. If you can't, in other words, you can't, to make a law, for a Christian to make a law that would coerce another person to become a Christian, scripturally would probably be an unjust law, because you are infringing upon that person's ability to choose or reject God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting way of looking at it, because usually you don't think of it being a justice issue to allow somebody to reject God. That's not what we want, but in the economy, if you will, or the justice system of how God designed things, that has to be there.
Yeah.
So any kind of society where you start leaning people towards having to be something is actually impinging on their justice to be able to make a rightful decision.
Yeah.
Which
That's-
seems would go against the mind of God.
Well, and I mean, yeah, everything you said, I fully agree with. And two things to think about that is, one, like you said, yes, justice requires that we have the choice to accept or reject. But two, even if you believe that that's not justice, that really, well, we should have a structure that tries to get people to accept him at every cost. Well, that doesn't work either. That's just not practical. I mean, look at nations that do that require religious uniformity. Those people are not true religious adherents. If you're forced into Christianity, are you going to be a true believer? Likely not. So it doesn't even work. Even if you believe that this wasn't really a justice issue, that we can impose strict laws to force people into Christianity or whatever faith. I mean, look throughout the world, it doesn't work.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, I had a professor once that said that the ways that Christianity in particular has grown the most is usually in places of persecution. Well, if you flip that on the other side, the ways that Christianity has seemed to decrease the most is whenever Christianity had this overruling power over the citizens that kind of declared certain things upon them.
Right.
That typically tends to backfire.
Right.
And so it needs to be this kind of open system to allow people to both accept or reject in that sense. Well, let me ask you this, kind of our last thing. When it comes to knowing God and the justice system, what do you think is at stake whenever we have the conversations about religious liberty in particular? This is kind of your passion within the law. If we lose a sense of religious liberty, in the United States, for instance, what does that mean, in your opinion, for the church? Like, just for Christians and in general, like, what are we going to lose, and why is that necessarily a bad thing if we lost that, that standing? Beyond just like, maybe taxes or giving or that kind of thing. Is there a certain kind of spiritual hit that you think the church is going to take if all of a sudden all religious liberty is taken away from them? Which is what some people in the United States would, are kind of fighting for. Like, they want to try to decrease as much religious liberty as possible. But if we lose that sense of liberty, religious liberty, even amongst groups that aren't necessarily Christian, like, what do you think is the thing that's at stake the most? What are we going to lose the most as a society if religious liberty becomes something that's just continually minimized?
As far as how it would affect the church, like you mentioned, the church has flourished under persecution.
Sure.
Now, people often use that as an argument as to why we should embrace persecution in a democracy. And I don't believe that at all.
Sure.
We as Christians should always be advocating for justice. Religious liberty is required for justice. We should never hope for persecution for ourselves, for others. I don't believe we should ever hope for that, because it's just wrong.
Right.
Saying, no, Christians, you cannot, worship in this way or choose these people as your leaders, that's wrong. But I do think that actually, if those things were to happen, there are certainly places where Christianity has decreased significantly under persecution. That happens, but often, maybe that was, when you look at historically, churches that, maybe weren't advocating for a true Christian life.
Yeah.
Where I think now, if we were to undergo persecution, I think, you would see a lot of people end up leaving the church. But I think there would be a clear dividing line between those that are ready to face the persecution and dedicated believers of the Lord. And I think their faith will flourish and grow and be a wonderful example to the world.
Yeah.
But I think, of course, there's always will be people that won't withstand that. So
right.
I think both those things can happen. But as far as what it means to society, I am a firm believer that society is always best benefited when we have as many viewpoints as possible being able to express themselves openly.
Yeah.
A pluralistic society that respects dissent, that respects diversity of thought, diversity of religion, we are benefited strongly by that. And it's ironic because, for example, the issue with Chi Alpha is that campus administrators, their argument is that, well, it's harmful for diversity to have Chi Alpha here because they're only having leaders that are Christians. So they're discriminating and they're hurting the body of our school by doing that.
Yeah.
But really, I think we all in Chi Alpha know, no, you're hurting your student body by not letting this amazing group be here. Sure, they have standards. Every group has standards.
Right.
Sure that you may not agree with all of them, but undoubtedly Chi Alpha is a major contributor to campus life. I think it's like that in our society with every religion. Even those I firmly disagree with, we are better off having them be able to express themselves and be a part of our society. When we lose that and we require uniformity, we may be thinking we're doing the right thing because we might think we have it all right. We figured out exactly what music, and we need to mandate that, but we're almost always wrong. We're almost never exactly right. We're better off having it. So our society loses out when we restrict certain groups and elevate others.
Right, and I think that it's the point that I've heard numerous times that I really agree with is the best way to disrupt a bad argument is to provide a better argument. So it's not the minimizing of voices that's going to necessarily advance us as people. It's the ability for those voices to have a conversation, and if it's a bad perspective, like there are some ones that are really obvious that we could point out that are just not good for society, well, typically as long as we just have people that are combating them, and saying, this is the reason why I don't think that it's good that you do that, or that you think that, then we've got a more flourishing at. But at the moment that we start taking voices off the table, just because we know or we think that they're not healthy, it's counterintuitive, but it actually is hurting a little bit more than it's helping.
Absolutely.
For sure. So, well, cool. Well, why don't you finish us off and pray for us about this issue of, justice in the law.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. Lord God, we are so thankful that you have given us, you have revealed to us your truth through the Bible, Lord God. And I pray for all of us that are watching this, and for Matt and myself, that you help us whenever we're going through your word, and whenever you are revealing new things about yourself to us, God, that you help us translate that into our understanding of justice, and you help our conception of justice be formed by your teaching, your revelation, your word, and also that when we participate in our democracy, and we're making decisions for our country, God, that we keep those precepts in mind, that we keep that conception of justice in mind, and God, let that just be so instilled in our heart that it overflows in us, in all of our decisions we make, and in our understanding of how our society can function, God. So I pray for that for each of us. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, thanks for clocking in with us. And by the way, it is the day before the election. And so what a timely moment to be having this conversation. But just goes to show that as Christians, we are to not only follow Jesus, but also be informed and interact with the political process, as well as with law and issues of justice. So until next time, bye.